Hi, we're here to discuss the premium audit aspect of Assignment 5. And in looking at this content, as I was putting together the practice exam questions, it struck me that this is particularly meaty content. A lot of good exam questions can be drawn from it, but it's also pretty difficult content unless you're familiar with or have worked in premium audit. So I thought we'd take a step back and get a look at premium audit, where it came from, why it's done, and how it's done. And before we talk about the specifics of premium audit, to understand it, it's helpful to know how insurance is rated in general. And it's a pretty basic calculation that anyone can do, and it's the rate times the exposure. You multiply the rate times the exposure, that's the premium charge. In a simple sense, let's talk about a general liability policy for a mom and pop store. And a mom and pop store is just 8,000 square feet. That's the size of the physical space. And the particular policy is rated on square footage of the property and for their general liability. And it's probably in hundreds of square feet. So an 8,000 square foot store will yield 80 exposure units, and you'll see that term quite a bit, exposure units. Automobiles are insured for car months. So a unit of exposure for personal auto is one car month. One car insured for 1 month, that's 1 unit of exposure. 2 cars insured for a year, that's 24 units of exposure. So it helps to understand that term. So back to our general liability example. 8,000 square feet of store yields 80 exposure units because it's rated in hundreds of square feet. So let's say the rate is $3 for their particular type of business. A different store will have different rates. So if you're selling fireworks, you have a higher rate than if you're selling something very simple, so like a craft store. So, but let's just say, for the purpose of illustration, the rate is $3. So you have $3 times the exposure units, which we said was 80. That'll yield a premium of $240. That's the calculation. So, why do we need premium auditors? Well, in the case of a store like that, you might not, unless they expand operations. If they buy the adjacent store, and all of a sudden, by the end of the policy year, their store size is, instead of 8,000 square feet, it's 15,000 square feet. That changes the whole calculation of the rate. And it's important for someone like a premium auditor to discover that. But in a more common example, we could talk about workers' compensation, which is typically rated in hundreds of dollars of payroll per each classification of worker. So, someone who's a roofer or works installing high-story buildings is going to have a higher rate than someone who has a desk job behind a computer, which is typically called a clerical class for workers' compensation. So again, take the total payroll of all the workers in one class, divide that by 100 because the exposure unit is hundreds of dollars of payroll per $100 of payroll. Multiply that by the rate, and you'll get a premium charge for each class. And then, of course, you add up all of those, and then you get the total charge for that policy. And organizations grow, they shrink, they acquire other organizations, they hire people, they fire people, people retire. So the payroll at the beginning of the year and the payroll at the end of the year are likely to be quite different. And so the way that insurers, with the insurance cooperation, can determine what's the fair premium we should charge for this policy period that has just expired, and let's say it's a 12-month policy, is to charge a provisional premium up front based on, hey, what do exposures look like now? And then adjust it on the back end through what is called a premium audit. And the premium audit will probably yield an additional premium or return premium. But honestly, a better term for it is an exposure audit. The auditor is going in to see what has changed about the exposure units that are on this policy and the classifications that they fall into. And if you go back in time, the premium auditor's job before the computer age, the personal computer age really took off, they'd go in with pencil and paper and a bunch of forms probably, and look at the insured's books, to look at employment records, financial records, whatever about the insured's records would inform the insurer about what the exposure units had been over the previous term of the policy. That changed beginning in the 80s. It really took off in the 90s when the auditor would show up with a laptop and record the same sort of information, but in a way that could be automated once that laptop got back to the home office, and it wouldn't require somebody transcribing all of the paper information and entering it into a computer system. And then after around 2000 moving forward, the process got modernized again through the internet, and there's a lot of remote auditing that can be done. A premium auditor can sit at a desk in a branch office or home office, and through the internet, with the cooperation of the insured, as always, conduct that premium audit. And there's an increasing amount of self-reporting. Again, typically, that is also made easier with internet-type transactions. So that's what premium audit is about. That's why it's necessary. And keep in mind as you go through the modules in this assignment that talk about premium audit, keep in mind the very fundamentals of how rating takes place. And there's really two fundamental components of a rate or of a premium charge, and that's the rate and the exposure units. If you understand exposure units and how they can change, you're really going to be able to get your head around this material on premium audit.